To politics now, where Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney is standing strong against potential retaliation from her own party for being a Republican. It comes after her continued criticism of former President Trump's false claims that the 2020 election was stolen from him. GOP leadership has recently warned the Wyoming Congresswoman that her remarks are a distraction amid attempts to unite the fractured party. Really?
What
her remarks?
That
you mean
he's lying?
Wait, I just want to hold on.
About democracy?
Let me just ask a question. First of all, you have Liz Cheney, and then you have the insurrection. What do you think is more of a distraction? Liz Cheney saying the right thing, being a Republican and sticking to her conservative beliefs as a true Republican, or hundreds, maybe even thousands of people assaulting our Capitol, killing people, using the American flag to torture Capitol cops, running around in the halls screaming, "Where's Nancy Pelosi and Mike Pence?" They had a noose. Yeah. I'm just wondering, I would be distracted by that if I were a Republican who cared about my party and cared about my country.
Well, not Ron Johnson.
These are the most dishonest people I've ever seen in politics. Honestly.
Oh, there's not really a close...
That's saying a lot.
There's not really a close second to that.
Well,
and
that's where we are.
The lies, unfortunately, that, you know, Kevin McCarthy called out. Kevin McCarthy called out Donald Trump several weeks ago, or several months ago, and then backed down. Lindsey Graham called out Donald Trump, and then backed down because they're cowards. And it just... You know, Mika, it just continues. And the thing is, it'd be one thing if Donald Trump stopped spreading the big lie. It would be one thing if he stopped trying to undermine American democracy. It would be one thing if he stopped
He's not going to do that.
Trying to thwart the rule of law, ignoring one federal judge after another federal judge after another federal judge after another federal judge, saying there was no evidence of widespread voter fraud that would have any impact on the outcome of election. But, Mika, he just continues. He keeps spreading the big lie.
Well, he's using his little voice on his little stages with his little band going ba-dum-bump whenever he says something he thinks is interesting. He also has press releases, and Trump yesterday again called the 2020 election fraudulent, this time trying to co-opt the term the big lie for himself. But Cheney was having none of it. Who would? Tweeting in response, quote, "The 2020 presidential election was not stolen. Anyone who claims it was is spreading the big lie, turning their back on the rule of law and poisoning our democratic system." That is the most boring statement. It is so true.
Boringly
it is
true.
So unbelievably just plain and simple.
There's nothing controversial about it, Willie. And, you know, I just, what Liz Cheney just said right there, I find it hard to believe that any organization that calls itself a news organization would ever allow anyone who voted to overturn the election results on January the 6th would ever let them on without asking the first question. Right. Do you think the 2020 election was stolen? Do you think Joe Biden is the rightful president and was legally elected president of the United States? And if any news organization doesn't ask everyone that voted to undermine American democracy on January the 6th and continue to spread the big lie, then they are absolutely shameless and are no news organization at all. And yes, and they are complicit because this is an ongoing threat to American democracy. I'd love to say, hey, that happened January the 6th. It's over. And you know what? We learned our lessons, and let's be more prepared moving forward. We can't do that because there are like 175, 180 people still roaming around the halls of Congress who spread that big lie and continue taking that big lie out across America and spreading that big lie. Every bit as much of a lie as other monstrous big lies throughout history. Every bit as much of a big lie if you love American democracy, if you cherish Madisonian democracy. It's every bit as much of a big lie, every bit as much as separated from truth. if you are American who loves this country, loves Madisonian democracy, and loves the United States Constitution.
Yeah, those members of Congress, by the way, do appear on those shows all the time, and they are not asked that question. You're right that they should be, and if they ever are asked, they say, we're just asking questions. We have a right to know, don't we? Well, those questions were asked before courts. They were asked before election boards in states across the country, many of them run by Republicans who came back and said Joe Biden won the election. The statement that may cost Liz Cheney her position as GOP leadership chair, the 2020 presidential election was not stolen. She might lose her job over saying that statement of fact out loud. Also yesterday, CNN was first to report that at a closed-door conference in Georgia, Congresswoman Cheney said this, quote, "We cannot embrace the notion the election is stolen. It's a poison in the bloodstream of our democracy. We cannot whitewash what happened on January 6 or perpetuate Trump's big lie. It is a threat to democracy. What he did on January 6 is a line that cannot be crossed." Two NBC News sources confirmed Cheney's reported comments are, in fact, accurate. Cheney made the remarks during an off-the-record interview with former House Speaker Paul Ryan at the annual retreat for the conservative think tank American Enterprise Institute. Let's bring in co-founder of Punchbowl News, Anna Palmer, senior columnist for the Daily Beast, Matt Lewis, and national correspondent for the Washington Post, Philip Bump. Good morning to you all. Anna, let me start with you as you cover Congress every day. Is Liz Cheney, in fact, going to lose her job? It certainly sounds like there is a majority push within the Republican conference to oust her.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that she's closer to losing her job probably than she ever has been before. Right now, Congress is out on recess, but I would not be surprised if you see lawmakers in the House Republican Party call for a snap election. And clearly, over the last week and a half, we've seen House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy say he is not going to stand in the way of that. I don't think you're going to find any defenders. I think when you look at the House Republican leadership, they feel like she is not the messenger that they want right now. And they're already looking to who could potentially replace her, which we reported on in this morning's newsletter.
You know, Matt Lewis, it's been laughable through the years looking at big spending Republicans who really have been setting record deficits, record debts, defining who a real conservative is and who a real conservative is not. Certainly, these Washington Republicans have been anything but conservative through the years. If you just look at deficits and the debt and how they have wrecked us fiscally. But now they're defining conservatism in a way that people that ran up massive deficits and debts over the past 4 or 5 years now are complaining about deficits and debts and claiming that Mitt Romney and Liz Cheney are insufficiently conservative. I mean, you talk about a personality cult where ideas and ideology just doesn't matter anymore. That is this know-nothing Republican Party, isn't it?
Absolutely. You know, a few years ago, conservatives and Republicans quit caring about really what we considered the left versus the right, or progressivism versus conservatism. And it switched to really populism, or nationalism and populism, insiders versus outsiders. And if that's the paradigm, if that's the contrast, then they call people like Liz Cheney and Mitt Romney insiders, and they're the enemy. But look, Joe, I find it so interesting. As you know, there's this classic conservative book in the canon of conservative economic philosophy called The Road to Serfdom, and written by Hayek. And in the book, he says that in a totalitarian regime, the worst get on top. I think he was thinking of like the Soviet Union, but the Republican Party today is a place where the worst get on top. I mean, you have Marjorie Taylor Greene raising $3.2 million in the first quarter. People like Matt Gaetz, who are, as of now, welcomed in polite company and the Republican Party. And then you have Mitt Romney, like a thoroughly decent conservative guy, getting booed in Utah. And you have Liz Cheney, the Iron Lady, who is actually having the guts to stand up and do something that most of the men in the Republican Party won't do, and just frankly be honest about the big lie. And now she's being drummed out of her position. It's the worst getting on top. The incentives are all perverse. It's obviously a corrupt and dysfunctional organization.